Hello. I see there's one person, and I'm hoping that's you, Stafford. So I'm going to call you. If it's not Stafford, I don't know who you are, but hello. Hello, am I live? Oh, right, there's someone already watching. So whoever you are, hello. This is me. We're just testing the link to go live later on. It's very exciting. That's right. Oh, there's two people watching now, so maybe that's a mysterious person and you, Stafford. Oh. La, la, la. La, 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 la. Well, mysterious person, maybe you could put in the chat to see whether the room is looking okay. This is what we're doing. We're just testing to see if it looks okay, if the levels are okay, if everything looking good. Picture okay, sound okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, what I'm doing is I'm going to use. I'm not even using the Ethernet at all, so it can't be, because if it gets pulled out and it gets put back in again, everything doesn't reload. So I'm going to forget about that and just use the Wi-Fi. Oh, it's got four people watching now. It's very exciting. I don't know who you all are, but one is my colleague Stafford. We're just testing this. If I take that out, does that make any difference? That's the charger. It goes darker at my end, but I don't know. Okay, turn up that brightness there. Okay. Oh well, that's looking good. My end. The fire is out. I've got to stoke the fire. Mick Newman is in, of course. He said, "Evening all." Of course, he said in a very Jack Warnerish voice, "Evening all." Yes, I know, Jack Warner. Ah, so that's Mick and Stafford and two other mysterious people. So, Mick, in your chat, to answer in the chat, everything looking okay? In your best Jack Warner voice, perhaps you could. Yes, he says, sounds good from my end. Oh, okay, right, okay. Well, I'm going to keep this live stream on then, and I'm going to mute it, and I'm going to put this back up in front of it, something like that. No, someone's left. Oh no, someone's back before. Oh dear. And yeah, I think we're good to go. So also on the website, Staff, could you do what you did yesterday? I didn't check it, but make the link a bit. Oh, it's already done, is it? Oh, okay. All right. And if the same thing happens today as happens yesterday, I'll go ahead and re-edit the link and put it in the description, and then I'll step back and let you do the rest, if that's good. Yeah, to donate, text Christmas Carol followed by the thing. Yeah, but you need to say who to donate, who to text it to. You haven't got the number in there. Yeah. Okay. Sign also looks good. This is from Mick. Good, but you need to stand there for the next 90 minutes. No problem, mate. Devotion to the cause. You know how it is. Devotion to the cause. So, mystery people who are watching, we are just trialing, we are just teching the show for tonight and checking all the comments boxes, the pinned text. Nice. Yep. Okay. So you could, yeah. See you at, yeah. I'll see you. See you there. Grand. All right. Bye for now. Hello! Ha ha! Look, I look like Father Christmas. Oh, now that's a bit bright, that light. I wonder if we need that light on there. Look! This is a... Look, that's Reggie. Abby. Jamie. This is live! It's live! It's today, it's Christmas Eve, it's almost Christmas! It's almost Christmas. Everyone done all their Christmas shopping? Put your hand up if you've done all your Christmas shopping. Put your hand up if you've wrapped all your Christmas shopping up. Put your hand up if you've wrapped all your Christmas shopping up, you've got a nice glass of wine, and you've got nothing else to do after listening to our story. Put your hand up if all of those was a complete fib and you'd be lying. I knew it. Don't think I can't see you. You think this is like, you know, like the telly. I see every one of you. Every one of you. I see you. I see you. So we're going to start. We're going to do the story at 7 o'clock. We're just having a few songs and a few little carol sounds and noises. A little bit of fire. Look, real fire. Is that a real fire?
Yes.
Now, is it hot?
Yes.
So at 7 o'clock, we're going to tell the story. But before then, we're just going to have a little bit of music. And then Abby's going to sing a few songs. Oh, yeah. And all tonight, we're raising money for the night shelter. Look, wait a minute. Look at that. Look at them, Reg. Look, look. Look at them running for the door. Raising money. Outrageous. Look, come back. Listen to this.
Please donate to Colchester Night Shelter. Donate now. It goes to people who suffer from homelessness, and text to 70085. Text Xmas Carol. Christmas Carol. And your amount. So £5, £10 or £50 million. 70085 Xmas Carol.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Jamie. Jamie's going to be playing the piano. And should we have a song now? What about so? What do you want to
I'm
sing?
I'm going to sing In the Bleak Midwinter.
In the Bleak Midwinter. That's my favourite.
Minus a couple of verses by Christina Rossetti. In the bleak midwinter, frosty winds made moan. Earth stood hard as iron, water like a stone. Snow had fallen, snow on snow, snow on snow. In the bleak midwinter, long ago. Angels and archangels may have gathered there. Cherubim and seraphim throng the air, but only his mother in her maiden bliss worship the beloved with a kiss. What can I bring him, poor as I am? If I were a shepherd, I would bring a lamb. If I were a wise man, I would do my part. Yet what I can I give him, give my heart.
Whoa! So, hello, if you've only just joined us, welcome, welcome, come in, come in, come in. This is my house. We are live. It's Christmas Eve. It's live. How live is it, Red?
Very live.
It's very live indeed. So we're going to do our story at 7 o'clock, and we're just having a few little songs and a few little music, a few carols that James is playing as a little introduction to get to set the spirit, set the scene, and we're going to tell the story, the ghost story, at 7 o'clock. This is all in aid of the night shelter, the Colchester Night Shelter, which is the charity for the homeless.
Donate to 70085 plus your amount and Xmas Carol.
Oh, I tell you what, can you get a piece of
Yeah.
and blue tack it up here?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to blue tack the number for you all to donate from up here, and so it'll be with you all the time. That's a lovely bit of music. It's real, it's live. Welcome, come in everyone, come in. We're having some songs. We're having some songs and a little bit set the atmosphere. Look, it's a real live fire. This is Abby. This is Jamie. Jamie's playing while we do the story. Christmas Eve. Tomorrow's the day. Are we ready for another song? Okay.
Okay, this song is called A Christmas Carol, called that.
Oh.
And it's by G.K. Chesterton.
G.K. Chesterton. Pour yourself a glass of something nice for this evening.
The Christ child lay on Mary's lap. His hair was like a light. Oh, weary, weary were the world, but here is all right. The Christ child lay on Mary's breast. His hair was like a star. Oh, stern and cunning are the kings, but here the true hearts are. The Christ child lay on Mary's heart. His hair was like a fire. Oh, weary, weary is the world, but here's the world's desire. The Christ child stood at Mary's knee. His hair was like a crown, and all of the flowers looked up at him, and all of the stars looked down.
Oh, wow. That was really nice. Ah, how lovely. Come in. Welcome. We're going to do the story at 7. Now, this is the number to donate to use as a donate for the night shelter, Colchester's charity for people affected by homelessness.
Text Xmas Carol to 70085 and your amount.
Right, do you want to get a chair?
I'm not tall enough.
Yeah, do you want to get a chair? And then we can put that up there.
Okay.
Bring a chair through. So this is really live. This is like lo-fi. This is my computer. Look, I just moved around like this. So it's a very, very high, low tech. Whoop, here we go. Careful with that.
Right.
So this is Reggie. Reggie's just putting up the number to donate from. We're going to do the story. I look a little bit like, guess who I look like?
Father Christmas.
Nearly. I was going to say Uncle Albert from Only Fools and Horses. So that's a bit depressing. But, you know, you never know, do you? I did this yesterday and there was someone who had never seen me since I was 16 years old. His name is Vince Taylor. And some of the Watford people who are watching will know that my first girlfriend was Karen Taylor. He said, my dad's going to watch. He hadn't seen you since he was 16. So I said, well, he's going to get a bit of a shock, isn't he? 16 years old. I look a bit different from then. Anyway, Uncle Albert and Santa Claus. Reggie's just putting up the number. I don't know if you can. Well, you can maybe. Anyway, it's there in spirit. You're going to have to donate. If you want to comment, you can comment. I hope I'm pointing to the right side of the screen, but it might be that side. I don't know. Somewhere or other is the comments, and you can add your comments as you go along. We've got Stafford Glover, who will be able to answer. Hope you can see us okay. It might be better on a smaller screen. And we'll be a bit grainy, but this is lo-fi. This is the way that we're working. This is what I don't know what it is. We're making this up as we go along. Yesterday we were doing this, and Beryl, her mum, rang us in the middle of it to say how much she was enjoying it. Telephone went off. Hello, Beryl. I'm just a little busy at the moment, dear. You know. So how are we getting on? What's the time now? 18:58. All right. Okay. Nearly ready. Just put this back here. So Christmas Eve, nearly there. Come in. If you haven't come in, if you're only just joining us, we're just having a few songs. We're just setting the atmosphere. We've got a lovely fire going here. Oh, let's put see, this is real. This is all real. This is real time. This is all real time. Just going to put a log on the fire. Oh, that's it. Gorgeous. Now, I'm sure you could all waft of good log fire. They are really in the room. They're really in the room. It's all real, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, dear. This feels so strange, I tell you. We're all so nervous. No, we're not. We're fine. We're absolutely fine.
Sure. Is it time to go wassailing? Yeah, so what's the time now? So it is
always just coming up to 7 o'clock. So let's here we go. We're going to start by. No, we're not going to start yet. We're going to have another little song, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're going to go
a bit more of a,
a bit more of a
cheerful.
All right.
Here we go, wassailing among the leaves so green. Here we come, a wassailing so fair to be seen. Love and joy come to you, and to you your wassail too. And God bless you and send you a happy new year. And God send you a happy new year. Here we come, a wassailing along the leaves so green. Here we come, a wassailing so fair to be seen. Love and joy come to you, and to you your wassail too. And God bless you and send you a happy new year. And God send you a happy new year.
Way. Well, Abby Cunliffe, well done. So, here we are. Welcome. Come in.
Number there.
What's the number? Oh, yes, here's the number. If you haven't, if you need to, we're raising money for the night shelter, you text
Xmas Carol.
You text Xmas Carol to this number.
And your amount.
Thank you very much. There's my telephone in there because I need to give a note of the time as we go along. Put my phone down. So, we are going to be telling the story tonight. Oh, I found it, Reg. It's okay. Live from the sitting room instead of the art centre. When the art centre closed on the 17th of March, I announced I will not be shaving until the art centre reopens, thinking it would be about 3 weeks. And this is what I've ended up looking like, which is utterly ridiculous. I know. It's absurd, isn't it? But that's what I've ended up looking like. And but it is kind of seasonal, I guess. A lot of people have pointed out you do look like Father Christmas, or Uncle Albert from Only Fools and Horses. That's been said quite often as well. And every year we do the Christmas Carol at the Arts Centre. But this year, obviously, the Arts Centre is shut. And so, by the magic of the electronic interweb, you are in our very home, live tonight on Christmas Eve at 7 o'clock. This story has been done in so many different ways. It's been done as numerous different films, it's been done as musicals, it's been done as plays, it's been done as radio plays. Everyone's got a different favourite Scrooge. Leonard Roster has done it, Charles Norton's done it. My favourite, my own personal favourite, Alistair Sim. I think his film's been really good. But it's still resonant today, 177 years after it was first written. And who'd have thought that in this day and age, here and now, we still need food banks. We still need help for the very poorest out of charity in our communities. If you'd have told Dickens that 177 years ago, I don't know what he'd have made of that. But it's a beautiful story. We are just going to give you the text. I'm just going to give you the text as Dickens wrote it himself. He performed this in Colchester in 1849 and 1851, up the road in our theatre, up the road. Charles Dickens himself came to this town, and it would have been in gaslight. There would have been 2,000 people in this theatre. The Theatre Royal in Colchester burnt down in 1905. And the atmosphere would have been absolutely electric. He was a triple A celebrity. He was more famous in Colchester than Dr. Anthony Roberts is now. Yes, I know, hard to believe. But and when he walked out, it just would have been gaslight, people, celebrity, and the atmosphere would have been. But I feel that even over the airways, we will even surpass that wonderful atmosphere with the story that we're going to tell you tonight. It's a ghost story, so please don't get too frightened. It's in 5 chapters. We're going to do the first 2 chapters, then we're just going to have a tiniest little comfort break, just a little 5 minutes so that you can refill your glasses, grab a mince pie, use the loo or whatever. We're going to have a few little songs again from Abby for those who missed it before, and then we're going to do the last 3 chapters, and then it's nearly Christmas Day. So, welcome to A Christmas Carol, Chapter 1. It begins like this. Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial had been signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it. Scrooge knew he was dead. Of course he did. How could it be otherwise? They'd been partners for I don't know how many years. Ebenezer Scrooge, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel ever struck out generous fire. Secret, self-contained, as solitary as an oyster. The cold within him had frozen his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheek, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. External heat or cold had little influence upon Scrooge. No warmth could warm, nor wintry weather chill him. No wind blew that was bitterer than he. No falling snow more intent upon its purpose. No pelting rain less open to entreaty. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to inquire of him with gladsome looks, "Oh, my dear Scrooge, how are you?" No beggar implored him to bestow a trifle. No child asked of him what it was o'clock. No man or woman ever, in all his life, inquired the way to such and such a place. Now, once upon a time, of all the good days in the year, old Scrooge was busy in his counting house. It was cold, bleak, biting weather, foggy withal, and he could hear the people in the court outside stamping their feet upon the pavement stones to warm him. Scrooge kept the door of his office open that he might keep his eye upon his clerk, who was busy in some dismal cell beyond copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but his clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like one coal. Scrooge kept the coal box in his room, so as surely as the clerk came in with his shovel, then his master predicted it would be necessary for him to part. "Merry Christmas, Uncle!" came the cheerful voice of Scrooge's nephew, who came upon him so quickly that this was the first intimation he'd had of his approach. "Bah!" said Scrooge. "Humbug! Christmas a humbug, Uncle? You don't mean that, I'm sure." "I do. Christmas? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough." "Come then," returned the nephew gaily. "What right have you to be dismal? You're rich enough." "Humbug! Every idiot that goes around with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. Christmas? Much good has it ever done you?" "Well, I've always thought of Christmas as a good time," said the nephew. "And ever, Uncle, although it's never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe it has done me good and will do me good, and I say, God bless it." The clerk involuntarily applauded. Immediately sensible of his impropriety, he poked the fire and extinguished the last frail spark forever. "Let me hear another sound from you," said Scrooge, "and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. Come, don't be angry, Uncle," said the nephew. Come and dine with us tomorrow." Scrooge replied that indeed he did. He went the whole length of the expression and said that he would see him in that extremity first. "Well, I'm sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute," said the nephew. "So I shall keep my Christmas humour to the last, and so I say a Merry Christmas to you." "Good afternoon." His nephew stopped by the outer door to bestow the season's greetings upon the clerk, who returned them cordially. This lunatic, in allowing Scrooge's nephew out, let two other people in. They were portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, and they now stood with their hats off in Scrooge's office. "Scrooge and Marley's, I believe," said one of the gentlemen, referring to his list. "Do I have the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?" "Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago this very night." "Oh, no doubt we'll find his liberality well represented by his surviving partner. At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we make some slight provision for the poor and destitute who suffer greatly at this present time. Are there no prisons?" "Plenty of prisons. And the union workhouses, are they still in full operation?" "I wish I could say they were not." "The treadmill and the poor law, both in full vigour then?" "Both very busy, sir. A few of us are endeavouring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and some means of warmth. What can we put you down for?" "Nothing." "You wish to remain anonymous?" "I wish to be left alone. If the poor be like to die, let them do so and decrease the surplus population. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. Good afternoon, gentlemen." Seen clearly, it would be useless to pursue their point. The gentlemen withdrew, and Scrooge resumed his labours with an improved opinion of himself. At length, the hour of shutting up the counting-house arrived, and with an ill will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool and tacitly admitted the fact to his clerk, who instantly snuffed out his candle and put on his hat. "You'll be wanting all day tomorrow, I suppose," said Scrooge. "If quite convenient, sir." "It's not convenient, and it's not fair. If I was to stop half a crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound." The clerk smiled faintly and observed that it was just once a year. "A poor excuse for picking a man's pockets every 25th of December, said Scrooge, buttoning his greatcoat to the chin. "But I suppose you should have the whole day. Be here all the earlier the next morning." The clerk promised he would, and Scrooge walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long white tails of his comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no greatcoat, went down a slide on Cornhill 20 times in honour of its being Christmas Eve. Why? Whoa, why? Scrooge took his usual melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern before going home to the chambers that once belonged to his deceased partner. They were a gloomy suite of rooms, in a lowering pile of a building, up a yard where the fog and frost hung about the black old gateway to the house. Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door, except that it was very large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it every night and morning during his whole residence in that place. Let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought upon Marley since his mention of his 7 years deceased partner that afternoon. So now let any man explain to me, if they can, how it happened that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, without it undergoing any intermediate process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face. It wasn't an impenetrable shadow like the other objects in the yard were, but had about it a dismal light, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. It wasn't angry or ferocious, but looked upon Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up upon ghostly forehead. As Scrooge stared fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again. To say that he was not startled would be untrue, but there was nothing on the back of the door except the screws and the nuts which held the knocker on, and Scrooge closed it with a bang. The sound resounded round the house like thunder, but Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes, and he fastened the door, walked across the hall and up the stairs, trimming his candle as he went. But before he closed the heavy door of his bedroom, he walked his rooms to see that all was right. He had just enough of a recollection of the face to desire to do that. Bedroom, sitting room, lumber room, all as they should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa, nobody under the bed, nobody in the closet. "Humbug," said Scrooge, closed the heavy door of his bedroom and walked his room. After several turns, he sat down, whereupon his eye happened to rest upon a bell. It was a disused bell that hung in the corner of the room and communicated for some purpose now forgotten with the chamber in the uppermost story of the building. It was with great astonishment and a strange, inexplicable dread that as he looked upon this bell, it began to swing. It swung so softly at the outset that it scarcely made a sound, but soon it rang out loudly, and so did all the bells in the house. This might have lasted half a minute or a minute, but it seemed like an hour. The bells ceased as they had begun, together, and was succeeded by a clanking sound like the sound of a person dragging a heavy chain. The cellar door flew open with a booming sound, and he heard the sound much louder on the floor below, now coming up the stairs, now coming straight towards his door. "It's humbug still! I won't believe it!" But his colour changed when, without a pause, it came through the door and into the room before his eyes. The same face, the very same. Marley, in his pigtails, usual waistcoat, tights and boots, the tassels of the lasser bristling like his pigtails and his coat skirts and the hair upon his head. The chain that he drew was clasped about his middle. It was long and wound about him like a tail, and it was made up of cash boxes, keys and padlocks, ledgers, deeds and heavy purses wrought in steel. Scrooge was as caustic and as cold as ever. What do you want with me? Much. Marley's voice, no doubt about it. You don't believe in me, observed the ghost. I don't. Why do you doubt your senses? Because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheat. You might be a bit of undigested beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are. Humbug, I said, humbug! At this the spirit raised such a fearful cry and shook its chains with such a dismal and appalling noise that Scrooge hung on tight to his chair to save himself from falling in a swoon. But how much greater was his terror when the phantom, taking off the bandage that was wound about his head, as if it were too warm to wear indoors, its lower jaw dropped down upon its breast. Scrooge fell down upon his knees and clasped his hands before his face. Oh, mercy, dreadful apparition! Why do you trouble me, man of the worldly mind? Do you believe in me or not? I do, I must, said Scrooge imploringly. Oh, Jacob Marley, speak comfort to me, Jacob. I have none. That comes from other regions, Ebenezer Scrooge, and is conveyed by other ministers to other kinds of men. A very little more is all that is permitted to me. I cannot rest. I cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere. Mark me! In life, my spirit never left our counting house, and weary journeys lie before me. At this, the spirit held out its chain at arm's length, as if that was the cause of all its unavailing woe. And then he flung it heavily on the ground again. Hear me! Cried the ghost. I'm here tonight to warn you. You yet have a chance and a hope of escaping my fate. You will be haunted by 3 spirits. I think I'd rather not. Without their visits, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tonight when the bell tolls 1. Expect the second on the next night at the same hour, and the third upon the last night when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more, and look that for your own sake you remember what has passed between us. When it had said these words, the spectre took his wrapper from the table and bound it round his head as before. The apparition then walked backwards from it, and with each step he took, the window raised itself a little, so that when the spectre reached it, it was wide open. It beckoned for Scrooge to approach. When they were within 2 paces of each other, Marley's ghost raised his hand, warning him to come no nearer. Scrooge stopped, not so much in obedience as in surprise and fear, for on the raising of the hand, he'd become conscious of confused noises in the air. Incoherent sounds of lamentation and regret, wailings, inexpressibly sorrowful and self-accusatory. After listening for a moment, the spectre joined in the mournful dirge. And then he floated out into the bleak, dark night. Scrooge hastened to the window, desperate in his curiosity, and looked out. The air was filled with phantoms, wandering hither and thither in desperate haste. Some few were linked together, but none were free. The misery that was within them all was clearly that they sought to interfere in human matters for good, but had lost the power forever. Whether these creatures faded into mist or mist enshrouded them, he could not tell, but they and their spirit voices faded together, and the night was once again as it had been when he walked home. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was locked, double locked, as he had locked it with his own hand, and the bolt remained undisturbed. He tried to say, but stopped after the first syllable. And whether because of the emotions he'd undergone, or the fatigues of the day, or his glimpse of the invisible world, or the dull conversation of the ghost, or the lateness of the hour, much in need of repose, went straight to bed without undressing and fell asleep upon the instant. When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that looking out from his bed, he could scarcely distinguish the transparent windows from the opaque walls of the chamber. The chimes of a neighbouring church struck the 4 quarters, so he listened for the hour. To his great astonishment, the heavy bell went from 6 to 7 and 7 to 8 and regularly up to 12 and then stopped. Why, it isn't possible I could have slept through a whole day and far into another night. The idea being an alarming one, he scrambled out of bed and groped his way to the window. But all that he could make out was that it was still very foggy and extremely cold. Scrooge went to bed again and thought and thought and thought it over and over and over and could make nothing of it. The more he thought, the more perplexed he was, and the more he endeavoured not to think, the more he thought. Marley's ghost bothered him exceedingly. Was it a dream or not? He lay in this state until the chimes had gone 3 quarters more, when he remembered on a sudden that the ghost had warned of a visitation when the bell tolled 1, and he resolved to stay awake until the hour had passed. The quarter seemed so long that he was more than once convinced he must have fallen into a doze unconsciously and missed the clock, but at length it broke upon his listening ear. 1/4 past. Half past. 1/4 to. The 4 quarters and nothing more. But he spoke before the hour bell sounded, which it now did with a deep, dull, hollow melancholy. 1! Light flashed up in the room upon the instant. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside, and Scrooge found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them. It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man, diminished to a child's proportions. The hair that hung about his neck and down his back was white as if with age, but his face had not a wrinkle in it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. He wore a tunic of the purest white, held a branch of fresh green holly in his hand, but in singular contradiction to that wintry emblem, had his dress trimmed with summer flowers. But the strangest thing about him was that from the crown of his head there sprung a bright, clear jet of light by which all this was visible. "Are you the spirit, sir, whose coming was foretold to me?" "I am." The voice was soft and gentle and singularly low, as if instead of being so close beside him, it were at a distance. "Who and what are you?" "I am the ghost of Christmas past, your past." Scrooge made bold as to ask what business brought him there. "Your welfare," said the ghost. Scrooge expressed himself much obliged, but couldn't help from thinking that a night of unbroken rest might have been more conducive to that end. The ghost put out a strong hand as he spoke. "Rise and walk with me." The grasp, though gentle as a woman's hand, was not to be resisted. He rose, but finding the spirit making towards the window, he grasped his robe in supplication. "I am a mortal," remonstrated Scrooge, "and liable to fall." "Bear but a touch of my hand there," said the ghost, laying it upon his heart, "and you will be upheld in more than this." And then they passed through the wall and were now standing in an open country road with fields on either hand. "Good heaven," said Scrooge. clasping his hands together as he looked about him. I was bred in this place. I was a boy here. They walked along the road with Scrooge recognising every gate and post and tree until a little market town appeared in the distance with its church tower and its bridge and its little winding river. Some shaggy ponies now were seen trotting towards them with boys on their backs calling out to other boys in country gigs and carts driven by farmers. These boys were in great spirits and shouted to each other until the broad fields were so full of merry music that the crisp air laughed to hear it. These are but shadows of things that have been, said the ghost. They have no consciousness of us. Scrooge knew them all and named them, every one. Why was he rejoiced beyond all bounds to see them? Why was his heart so filled with gladness to hear them give each other Merry Christmas as they parted at the byroads and crossroads for their several homes? What was Merry Christmas to Scrooge? Out upon Merry Christmas? What good had it ever done to him? They soon reached a mansion of dull red brick, and on entering went to a door at the back of the house. It opened before them to reveal a long, bare, melancholy room made barer still by lines of plain deal benches and desks. And at one of these, a lonely boy sat reading by a feeble fire. Scrooge sat down upon one of the benches and wept. He wept to see his poor forgotten self as he had used to be. All of a sudden, a man in foreign garments, wonderfully distinct and real to look at, appeared outside the window, leading an ass laden with wood by the bridle. Why, that's Ali Baba! Scrooge cried in ecstasy. Dear old honest Ali Baba. Yes, I remember there was one Christmas when yonder solitary boy was left here all alone. He did come for the first time, just like that. To hear Scrooge expending all the earnestness in his nature in this most extraordinary voice between laughing and crying would have been a surprise to his business friends in the city indeed. I wish, muttered Scrooge, putting his hand in his pocket and looking about him after drying his eyes with his cuff. But it's too late now. What's the matter? Asked the ghost. It's nothing. It's just there was a boy singing a Christmas carol outside my door last night. I should like to have given him something, that's all. The ghost smiled thoughtfully and waved his hand, saying as he did so, let us see another Christmas. Door opened, and a little girl, much younger than the boy, came darting in and, putting her arms around his neck, addressed him as, my dear brother. I've come to take you home, dear brother, said the girl. Home for ever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be, but home is like heaven. But first, we're to be together all Christmas long and to have the merriest time in all the world. Always a delicate creature, said the ghost, whom a breath might have withered, but she had a large heart. So she had, cried Scrooge. You're right, Spirit, I'll not gainsay it. She died a woman and had, as I think, children. One child, true, said the ghost. Your nephew. Scrooge looked uneasy in himself and answered briefly, yes. Although they had, but that moment, been in the school, they were suddenly now in a busy thoroughfare where all the strife and turmoil of a real city were. The spirit stopped by a certain warehouse door and asked if Scrooge knew it. Know it? Said Scrooge. Was I apprenticed here? They went in, and at the sight of an old man in a Welsh wig, Scrooge cried with great excitement, why, that's old Fezziwig. Bless his heart. Old Fezziwig put down his pen and looked up at the clock which pointed to the hour of 7. He rubbed his hands together, adjusted his capacious waistcoat, laughed all over himself, and called out in a rich, comfortable, oily, jovial voice, whoa there, boys! Ebenezer! Dick! Scrooge, as his former self, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow apprentice. Why, That's Dick Wilkins, to be sure, said Scrooge to the ghost. Oh, he was very much attached to me, was Dick. Poor Dick. Dear, dear. What ho there, boys? No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas Ebenezer. Clear away, my lads, and let's have lots of room here. It was done in a minute. And then in came a fiddler with a songbook and tuned like 50 stomachaches. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, with vast substantial smile. In came the 3 Miss Fezziwigs, all beaming and laughable. In came their 6 young suitors, whose hearts they broke. In came the housemaid, in came the cook, in they all came, one after the other, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly, some pushing, some pulling, in they all came, anyhow and everyhow. And then there was dances, and there was forfeits, and there was more dances, and there was a great piece of cold boiled, and there was cakes, and there was negus, and there was mince pies, and there was plenty of beer. But the great effect of the evening came after the roast and boiled, when the fiddler struck up Sir Roger de Coverley. When the clock struck 11, this domestic ball broke up, and Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwigs, taking up their stations, one on either hand of the door, and shaking hands with every person individually as he or she left, wished him or her a Merry Christmas. And when everyone had left, save the 2 prentices, they did the same to them. And thus the cheerful voices died away, and the 2 lads were left to their beds, which were under a counter in the back shop. All this time, Scrooge acted like a man out of his wits. He corroborated everything, remembered everything, enjoyed everything, and underwent the strangest agitation. The ghost beckoned him to listen to the 2 prentices who were busy pouring out their hearts in praise of Fezziwig. And when he had done this, he said, "He has spent but a few of your mortal pounds, some 3 or 4 perhaps. Is that so great as to deserve this praise?" "It isn't that," said Scrooge, heated by the remark and speaking unconsciously like his former and not his latter self. "He has the power to render our services light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it had cost a fortune. I should like to be able to say a word or 2 to my clerk just now." His former self turned down the lamp as he gave utterance to the wish, and Scrooge and the spirit were once again side by side in the open air. "My time grows brief," observed the spirit. "Look." Again Scrooge saw himself, but older now, a man in the prime of life. He was not alone, but sat beside a fair young girl in whose eyes there were tears that sparkled in the light that shone from the ghost of Christmas past. "It matters little," she said softly. "To you, very little. Another idol has displaced me, a golden one. I have seen your noble aspirations fall off one by one until the master passion, gain, engrosses you." "What then?" said Scrooge. I'm not changed towards you." "Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so. You were another man." "I was a boy," he said impatiently. "If this had not been between us, would you seek me out and try to win me now? Do I not know that your repentance and regret would surely follow?" "I do. And I release you with a full heart for the love of him you once were." He was about to speak, but with her head turned from him, she said, "May you be happy in the life you have chosen." And then she left, and they parted. "Spirit," said Scrooge, "why do you delight to torture me?" "One shadow more," said the ghost. "No, I don't want to see it. Show me no more." But the relentless ghost pinioned him in both his arms and forced him to observe what happened next. They were in another scene and place, a room not very large or comfortable, but filled with joyous atmosphere. Sat near to the winter fireplace was a girl so like the last that Scrooge believed it was the same, until he saw her, now a comely matron, sitting opposite her daughter. The noise in this room was perfectly tumultuous, for there were more children in it than Scrooge could count. There were not 40 children conducting themselves as one, but every child conducting themselves like 40. And now a knocking at the door was heard, and such a rush ensued, she was borne towards it just in time to meet her husband, who came home attended by a man laden with Christmas toys and gifts. And now Scrooge looked on more attentively than ever, as the master of the house, having his daughter leaning fondly on him, sat down with her and her mother by his own fireside. And when he thought that such another creature, quite as graceful and full of promises, she might have called him father, and been a springtime in the haggard winter of his life, his sight grew very dim indeed. "Belle," said the husband, turning to his wife with a smile, "I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon, Mr. Scrooge it was. I passed his office window where he sat alone, quite alone in the world, I do believe." "A spirit," said Scrooge in a broken voice, "lead me. Take me back. Haunt me no longer." "I told you," said the ghost, "these are but shadows of things that have been, that they are what they are. Do not blame me. Leave me. Take me back. Haunt me no longer." In the struggle, if it could be called a struggle, in which the ghost, with no visible effort on his part, was completely undisturbed by any effort of his adversary, Scrooge observed that his light was burning high and bright, and dimly connecting that with its influence over him, he seized the extinguisher cap, and by a sudden action pressed it down upon his head. The spirit dropped beneath it, but though Scrooge pushed it down with all his force, he couldn't hide the light which streamed from underneath it in an unbroken flood upon the ground. He was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further, of being in his own bedroom. He gave the cap a parting squeeze, in which his hand relaxed, and had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. It's all live, folks. Hello. Oh, all very high tech. Hello, hello. La. Ah. Tell them about the night shelter.
We're raising donations to the Colchester Night Shelter for people who suffer from homelessness, and you need to message to 70085, message Xmas Carol and your amount that you want to donate to, £5, £10 or 50 million. This is the number that you need to donate to, 70085, Xmas Carol and your amount.
Sit down. Sit down. Let's put a log on the fire. It's all real. It's all real time. What's the time? It's 1943 on Christmas Eve. Just put some logs on. So we're going to tell the second half of the story, but we're going to have a few interval songs. How about a carol, pal?
Yeah. Repeat. Okay. Let's see. Okay, this song is called In the Bleak Midwinter by Christina Rossetti. In the bleak midwinter, frosty winds made moan. Earth stood hard as iron, water like a stone. Snow had fallen, snow on snow, snow on snow. In the bleak midwinter, long ago. Angels and archangels may have gathered there. Cherubim and seraphim throng the air, but only his mother in her maiden bliss worship the beloved with a kiss. What can I give him, all as I am? If I were a shepherd, I would bring a lamb. If I were a wise man, I would do my part. Yet what can I give him? Give my heart.
Ah!
Text to 70085.
70085. That was lovely, darling. Thank you. Are we all feeling a bit more Christmassy?
I'm so excited. I want to open all those presents.
No!
Yes.
That's tomorrow. No, you're not allowed. See where your brother is. Is your brother ready to come back and play the piano? Where has he gone?
I think he's just coming.
All right, let's have the wassailing song then to get us back in the mood. Yeah, and then we'll have another song, and then we'll do the second half of the story. Make sure you fill up your glasses, grab your mince pies, make all your comments, live chat away. I can't read them, but put all the things that you want to say in there. That's lovely.
Okay. Here we come, a wassailing among the leaves so green. Here we come, a wassailing so fair to be seen. Love and joy come to you, and to you your wassail too. And God bless you and send you a happy new year. And God send you a happy new year. Here we come a-wassailing among the leaves so green. Here we come a-wassailing so fair to be seen. Love and joy come to you, and to you your wassail too. And God bless you and send you a happy new year. And God send you a happy new year.
Hey! Brilliant, okay. Now then, are we ready for the second half of the story?
It's the second half, yes.
Time for the second half? Ooh. So, chapter 3. Now, we've got 3 more chapters. I wonder what happens. No spoilers. No spoilers. Chapter 3, the second of the 3 spirits. Settle down, fill your glasses. Starts like this. Awaking in the middle of a prodigiously tough snore and sitting up in bed to get his thoughts together, Scrooge felt that he'd been restored to consciousness in time for the second messenger dispatched to him through Jacob Marley's intervention. Now, being prepared for almost anything, he was not by any means prepared for nothing. And consequently, when the bell struck 1 and nothing happened, he was taken with a violent fit of trembling. All this time he lay on his bed, the very core and centre of a blaze of ruddy light which streamed upon him, and was sometimes apprehensive that he might be, at that very moment, an interesting case of spontaneous combustion, without having the consolation of knowing it. At last, he began to think that the source and secret of the ghostly light might lie in the adjoining room. The idea taking full possession of his mind, he got up softly and shuffled in his slippers to the door. The moment Scrooge put his hand upon the lock, a strange voice called him by his name and bade him enter. It was his own room, but it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceiling were so hung with living green that it looked a perfect grove, and from every part of which bright gleaming berries glistened, and such a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney as that dull petrifaction of a hearth had never known in many and many a winter season gone. Heaped on the floor to form a kind of a throne was turkeys, geese, game, poultry, prawn, great joints of meat, sucking pigs, barrels of oysters, red-hot chestnuts, juicy oranges, luscious pears, and seething bowls of punch that made the chamber dim with their delicious steam. In easy state upon this couch, there sat a jolly giant. "Come in," said the spirit. "I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me." He was dressed in one simple green robe or mantle bordered with white fur. On his head he wore a holly wreath set here and there with sparkling icicles. His brown curls were long and free as his genial face, his sparkling eye, his open hand, his cheery voice, his unconstrained demeanour, and his joyful air. "Tonight," said Scrooge submissively, "if you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it." "Touch my robe." Scrooge did as he was told and held on fast. Holly, mistletoe, sausages, oysters, pudding, fruit and punch all vanished instantly. So did the room, the fire, the ruddy glow, the hour of night. And they were stood on the city streets on Christmas morning. There was nothing very cheerful in the climate of the town, but there was a cheerfulness in the air abroad that the brightest summer sun would have struggled to diffuse in vain. For the people were jovial, full of glee, calling out to one another from parapets, now and then exchanging a facetious snowball, laughing heartily if it went right, and not less heartily if it went wrong. And soon the steeple called to people all to church and chapel, and away they came, flocking through the streets in their best clothes and with their gayest faces. And at the same time, from scores of by-street lanes and nameless turnings came innumerable people carrying their dinners to the bakers' shops. The sight of these poor revellers appeared to interest the spirit very much indeed, for he stood with Scrooge by his side in a baker's doorway, and lifting up the covers as the bearers passed, sprinkled incense on their dinners from his torch. "Is there a peculiar flavour in what you sprinkle?" asked Scrooge. "There is. Mine own." "Does it apply to any kind of dinner on this day?" "To any kindly given. To a poor one most." They went on, invisible as they'd been before, into the suburbs which led them straight to Scrooge's clerk's. And at the threshold of the door, the spirit smiled and stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling with a sprinkling of his torch. And then up rose Mrs. Cratchit, dressed out but poorly in a twice-turned gown. She laid the cloth, assisted by Belinda Cratchit, second of her two daughters, while Master Peter Cratchit plunged a fork into a saucepan full of potatoes. "Why, whatever's got your precious father then?" said Mrs. Cratchit. "And your brother Tiny Tim? And Martha weren't as late last Christmas by half an hour." "There's Martha," cried the two young Cratchits. "Hurrah!" "Why, bless your heart alive, my dear," said Mrs. Cratchit, kissing her a dozen times. "Sit you down by the fire and have a warm." "Lord bless you." "There's father," cried the two young Cratchits. "Hide, Martha, hide!" And so Martha hid herself, and in came Bob the father, with at least 3 feet of comforter hanging down before him, and his threadbare clothes darned up and brushed to look seasonable. And on his shoulder, Tiny Tim. Alas for Tiny Tim, for he bore a little crutch and had his limbs supported in an iron frame. Now, I'm just going to interrupt a little bit of the narrative here, because what I picked up there over the airways is not a lot of sympathy, really, for Tiny Tim. I didn't feel a lot of human. This Tiny Tim has got his limbs supported in an iron frame. He bought a little crutch. So, for the story, for Tiny Tim, just try and give us, when you meet Tiny Tim, we want to give a little bit of an bit of a well, put it in the chat, whichever side, just something. Just try, and poor little Tiny. I'm going to give it a go again. This is your chance to redeem. I can see you all. I see you. This is your chance to redeem yourself. Right, okay, here we go. You ready, Jeremy? Right, we're ready to go. Alas for Tiny Tim, for he bore a little crutch and had his limbs supported in an iron frame. I see. Better. I mean, you can go crazy and donate some more money if you like, but it's just a little Tiny Tim. Better anyway. Where were we? Oh, yeah, right. "Where's Martha?" said Bob, looking about him. "Not coming," said Mrs. Cratchit. "Not coming," said Bob, a sudden declension in his high spirits. "Not coming on Christmas Day." Martha didn't like to see him disappointed, if it were only a joke. She rushed into his arms while the two young Cratchits hustled Tiny Tim and bore him off to the washhouse that he might hear the pudding singing in the copper. "And how was little Tim today?" asked Mrs. Cratchit. "As good as gold and better," said Bob. "He told me coming home that he hoped that people had seen him in church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant for them to remember who it was on Christmas Day made lame beggars walk and blind men see." His voice was tremulous as he told her this. But then back came Tiny Tim before another word was spoken. Now, while Bob mixed up some hot compound in a jug with gin and lemons, the two ubiquitous young Cratchits and Master Peter Cratchit went to fetch the goose, with which they soon returned in high procession. There never was such a goose. Bob said he didn't think there was ever such a goose cooked. Its tenderness and flavour, size and cheapness were the themes of universal admiration. Eked out by the Brussels sprouts and mashed potato, there was a sufficient dinner for the whole family. And now Mrs. Cratchit left the room alone, too nervous to bear witness, to take up the pudding and to bring it in. A speckled cannonball, so hard and firm, blazing in a half-quadrant of ignited brandy, bedight with Christmas holly, stuck into the top of it. At last, The dinner was done, the cloth cleared, the hearth swept and the fire made up. The compound in the jug tasted and considered perfect. Apples and oranges were put upon the table and a shovel full of chestnuts on the fire. And now the whole Cratchit family drew round the hearth and Bob proposed a Merry Christmas to us all, my dears, which all the family re-echoed. God bless us, everyone. God bless us, everyone, said Tiny Tim, the last of all. A spirit, said Scrooge. Tell me if Tiny Tim shall live. I see a vacant seat in the poor chimney corner. I see a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. Oh, no, no, kind spirit, say it isn't so. If these shadows remain unaltered, none other of my race shall find him here. What then? If he be like to die, let him do so and decrease the surplus population. Scrooge hung his head in shame to hear his own words quoted back to him. Mr. Scrooge, said Bob, I'll give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast. The founder of the feast, indeed, said Mrs. Cratchit, reddening. I'll give him a piece of my mind to feast upon. My dear, the children, Christmas Day. It should be Christmas Day, I'm sure, on which to drink the toast of such a hard, stingy, odious, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. But I'll drink it for your sake, and the day's, not for his. Long life to him. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. It was the first of their proceedings that was undertaken without any heartiness, for the mention of his name had cast a dark shadow over the party that was not dispelled for full 5 minutes. All this time, the jug and the chestnuts went round and round, and by they had a song from Tiny Tim about a little boy lost in the snow. He had a plaintive little voice, and he sang it very well indeed. There was nothing of higher mark than this. They were not a handsome family. They were not well dressed. Their shoes were far from waterproof, and their clothes were scanty. But they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time. And as they faded, looking happier yet on the bright sprinklings of the spirit's torch and parting, Scrooge had his eye upon them, and especially on Tiny Tim, until the last. The spirit didn't tarry, but bade Scrooge hold his robe and sped out over a black and heaving sea. On and on they went, on and on, until being far from any shore, they lighted on a ship. They stood beside the lookout at the bow, the helmsman at the wheel, and the officers who had the watch, dark, ghostly figures all in their several stations. But every one of them hummed a Christmas tune, or had a Christmas thought, or spoke to his companion below his breath of some bygone Christmas day, with homeward hopes belonging to it. It was a great surprise to Scrooge, whilst listening to the moaning of the wind, to hear a hearty laugh. It was an even greater surprise to recognise that laugh as his own nephew's, and to find himself suddenly now standing in a bright, dry, gleaming room, with the spirit standing at his side, looking upon that same nephew with approving affability. Laughed his nephew. He said that Christmas was a humbug, as I live, and he believed it too. I'm sure he's very rich, Fred, said Scrooge's niece. At least you always tell me so. What of that, my dear? Is wealth no use to him? He doesn't use it to make himself comfortable with. I don't know, he might rail at Christmas till the day he dies, but he can't help thinking better of it. I defy him. If he finds me in good temper, going there year after year and saying, Uncle Scrooge, how are you? After tea, they had some music, for this was a musical family, and they knew what they were about. But But they didn't devote the whole evening to music, and after a while they played at forfeits, for it's good to be children sometimes, and never better than at Christmas. There might have been 20 people there, young and old, but they all played, and so did Scrooge. For wholly forgetting that his voice made no sound in their ears, he sometimes came out with guesses quite loudly, and very often guessed right too. All this time the ghost looked upon him with such favour that he begged like a boy to be allowed to stay until the guests departed. There's a new game, Spirit, 1/2 hour more, only one. It was a game called Yes and No, where Scrooge's nephew had to think of something and the others must find out what, he only answering to their questions yes or no as the case was. The brisk fire of questioning elicited from him that he was thinking of an animal, rather a disagreeable animal. An animal that grunted and growled sometimes and lived in London and walked the streets. And I know what it is, Fred. It's your Uncle Scrooge, which it certainly was. Admiration was the universal sentiment, although some people objected that the answer to "Is it a bear?" ought to have been yes. He has given us much merriment, I'm sure, said the nephew. It would be ungracious not to drink his health. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to the old man, whatever he is. He wouldn't take it from me, but may he have it nonetheless. Uncle Scrooge. Uncle Scrooge, they cried. And the scene passed on the breath of the last words uttered by his nephew, and Scrooge and the Spirit were once again side by side in the open air. Much they saw, and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. The Spirit stood beside sick beds, and they were healthy. On foreign lands, and they were closer to home. By struggling men, and they were patient in their greater hope. By poverty, and it was rich. It was a long night, if indeed it were only a night. For while Scrooge remained unaltered in his outward form, the ghost grew older. Our Spirit's life's so short, asked Scrooge. My time upon this globe is brief, said the Spirit. It ends at midnight, and the time is drawing near. Look here. From the foldings of his robe came 2 children, abject, wretched, frightful, hideous, miserable. They were a boy and a girl, yellow, meagre, ragged, scowling, wolfish, yet prostrate too in their humility, where tender youth should have filled their features out and touched them with its freshest tints. A stale and shriveled hand like that of age had pitched and twisted them and pulled them into shreds. Where angels might have sat enthroned, devils lurked and peered out menacingly. Having had them shown to him in this way, Scrooge tried to say that they were fine. They were fine children, but the words choked themselves rather than be parties to a lie of such enormous magnitude. Spirit, are they yours? Scrooge could say no more. They are man's, said the Spirit. This boy is ignorance, this girl is want. Have they no refuge or resource? Are there no prisons? Said the Spirit, turning upon him for the last time with his own words. Are there no workhouses? The clock struck 12. Scrooge looked about him for the Spirit and saw it not. As the last stroke ceased to vibrate, he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes, beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him. Slowly, gravely, silently,
The phantom approached. It was shrouded in a deep black garment that left nothing visible of it save one outstretched hand. Scrooge felt that it was tall and stately when it came beside him, and that its mysterious presence filled him with a solemn dread. "I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come," the phantom answered not, but pointed downward with its hand. "You are about to show me shadows of things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us. Is that so, spirit?" The upper portion of the garment was contracted for an instant in its folds, as if the spirit had inclined its head, but that was the only answer he received. "Ghost of the future, I fear you more than any spirit I have seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear your company. Lead on, spirit." They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for rather the city seemed to spring up about them. But there they were, amongst the merchants who hurried up and down and chipped the money in their pockets and conversed in groups as Scrooge had seen them often. The spirit stopped by a small knot of businessmen, and observing the hand pointed to them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk. "No," said a great fat man with a monstrous chin. "Well, I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead." "When did he die?" inquired another. "Last night, I believe." What has he done with his money?" inquired a red-faced gentleman with a pendulous excrescence on the end of his nose that shook like the gills of a turkey cock. "I haven't heard," said the man with the large chin. "He hasn't left it to me, that's all I know." This pleasantry was received with a general laugh. "It's likely to be a very cheap funeral," said the same speaker, "for upon my life, I don't know of anybody to go to it." Speakers and listeners strolled off and mixed with other groups, and the ghost glided on again into another street, and again the finger pointed to two persons talking. Scrooge listened again, thinking that the explanation for the first conversation might lie here. "Well," said the first, "I see old Scratch has got his own at last, hey? So I'm told. Cold, isn't it? Seasonable for Christmas time." Not another word. That was their meeting, their conversation, and their party. Scrooge was at first inclined to be surprised that the ghost should attach importance to conversations apparently so trivial, but feeling assured there must be some hidden purpose, he looked about him for his own image. But another man was stood in his accustomed corner, and although the clock pointed to his usual hour of day for being there, he could find no likeness of himself in the multitudes that poured in through the porch. Quiet and dark, beside him stood the phantom with his outstretched hand. They went on into an obscure part of town that Scrooge had never penetrated, though he recognised its situation and its bad repute. The ways were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, the people half naked, drunken, slipshod, ugly. Alleys and archways, like so many cesspools, disgorged their offences of smell and dirt and life upon the straggling streets, and the whole quarter reeked with crime, with filth and misery. Far into this den of infamous resort, under a penthouse roof, was a low-browed beetling shop where iron old rags, bottles, bones, and greasy offal. Sitting among the wares he dealt in, by a charcoal stove, was a grey-haired old rascal. See, I knew the beard would come in handy, but this grey-haired old rascal. He'd screened himself from the cold without by a frowsy curtaining of miscellaneous tatters hung upon the line. Scrooge and the phantom came into the presence of this man just as a woman carrying a heavy bundle slunk into the shop. But she had scarcely come in when another woman, similarly laden, came in too, and she was closely followed by a man in faded black. "Let the childman alone to be the first," cried she who had entered first. Let the laundress alone to be the second, and let the undertaker's man alone to be the third. The old man raked his fire together with an old stair rod, and having trimmed his smoky lamp with the stem of his pipe, put it in his mouth again. While he was doing this, the woman who had spoken first threw a bundle on the floor and sat down in a flaunting manner, crossing her elbows on her knees. What odds, Mrs. Dilber? Who's the worst for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose. No, indeed, said Mrs. Dilber, laughing. Open the bundle, Joe, and let me know the value of it. But it was a man in faded black who produced his plunder first, which was not extensive. A seal or two, a pencil case, a pair of shirt buttons, and a brooch of no great value. They were severally examined and appraised by old Joe, who chalked the sums he was disposed to give for each upon the wall and added them up into a total when he found that there was nothing more to come. That's your account, he said. I wouldn't give another sixpence if I was to be boiled for not doing so. Mrs. Dilber was next. Sheets and towels, a little wearing apparel, 2 old-fashioned silver teaspoons, a pair of sugar tongs, and a few boots. Her account was stated on the wall in the same manner. I always give too much to the ladies, said Joe. That's a weakness of mine. That's the way I ruin myself. And now look at my bundle, cried the woman who had spoken first. Joe got down upon his knees for the greater convenience of doing so, and having unfastened a great many knots, pulled out a large and heavy roll of some dark stuff. What do you call this, he said. Bed curtains? And his blankets? Hope he didn't die of anything catching, eh? Don't you be afraid of that, said the woman. I ain't so fond of his company as I'd loiter about him for such things if he did. Scrooge listened to this dialogue in horror. Spirit, I see the fate of this unhappy man might be mine own. My life tends that way now. Merciful heaven, what is this? Scrooge recoiled in terror, for the room had suddenly changed, and now he almost touched a bed, a bare, uncurtained bed, on which, under a ragged sheet, there lay a something covered up. The room was dark, too dark to be discerned in any accuracy, although Scrooge glanced around it in obedience to a secret impulse, anxious to know what kind of room it was. A pale light, rising in the open air, fell straight upon the bed, and on it, unwashed, unwept, uncared for, lay the body of this man. The covers had been so carelessly adjusted that the slightest raising of them, the motion of a finger on Scrooge's part, would have disclosed the face. He thought, if this man could be raised up now, what would be his foremost thoughts? Avarice, hard dealing, griping cares. They'd brought him to a rich end, truly. He lay in that dark, empty house, with not a man, a woman, or a child to say that he was kind to me in this or that. Spirit, this is a fearful place. In leaving it, I shall not leave its lessons. Trust me, let us go. Still the ghost pointed with an unmoved finger to the head. I understand you, Scrooge returned, and would do it if I could, Spirit, but I have not the power. The phantom spread his dark robe before them for a moment like a wing, and, withdrawing it, revealed another room where a mother and her children were. She was expecting someone, and with anxious eagerness, for she walked up and down, starting at every sound. At length, the long-expected knock was heard. She hurried towards it just in time to meet her husband, a man whose face was careworn and depressed. Though he was young, he had the most remarkable expression in it now, one of serious delight, of which he felt ashamed and which he struggled to repress. There is hope yet, Caroline. If he relents, there is. Nothing is beyond hope if such a miracle has happened. He is past relenting. He is dead. What? Oh, people are saying that I can't. Can they hear me? Wait a minute. There's some comments here. Ange Taggart. Hello, Boris. Hello. Sounds like Newtown. Daniel thinks. Well, is there anybody? Just put it in the comments there. If you cannot hear me. Can we hear me? Okay. People,
Put in the comment. Oh, it's all live. It's all live.
Sorry.
Yes, I can hear, says Gordon.
Sorry, a couple of people.
Oh, a couple of people are saying, all right, well, it might be at their end then. Phew. Oh. Oh, dear.
Lay in the dark.
Yeah, no. All right, okay. Well, we can all hear. Okay, let's carry on. Carry on with the story then. We'll just get you to a good bit. To whom will our debt be transferred? I don't know, said the husband. But by that time, we shall be ready with the money. We may sleep tonight with light hearts, Caroline. Soften it as they would. Their hearts were lighter, and it was a happier house for this man's death. The only emotion the ghost could show him caused by the event was one of pleasure. Show me some tenderness connected with the death, said Scrooge, or that dark chamber spirit that we heard just now will be forever present to me. The ghost conducted him down several streets familiar to his feet, and as they went along, Scrooge looked here and there to find himself. But nowhere was he to be seen. They entered poor Bob Cratchit's house to find the mother and the children seated round the fire. But surely it was very quiet. At length, Mrs. Cratchit said, in a steady, cheerful voice that was only faltered once, I've seen him. I've known him walk very fast indeed, with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. But he was so light to carry, and his father loved him so, and it was no trouble. And there's your father at the door. His tea was ready for him on the hob, and they all tried who should help him to it most. And then the two young Cratchits climbed upon his knees and laid each child a little cheek against his face, as if they said, Don't mind it, father. Don't be grieved. You went a day then, Robert, said Mrs. Cratchit. Yes, my dear. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is, but you will be there often. I promised him I would walk there on a Sunday. My little boy. He broke down all at once. He couldn't help it. If he could have helped it, he and his child would have been farther apart, perhaps, than they were. I know, my dears, said Bob, when we recollect how mild and how patient he was, though he was a little boy. We shall not quarrel easily among ourselves and forget poor Tiny Tim in doing so. No, never, they all cried. I am very happy, said Bob. I am very happy. The spirit, said Scrooge. Something informs me our parting moment is at hand. Tell me who that man was whom we saw lying dead. The ghost conducted him as before, though at a different time, he thought. This court through which we hurry now is where my place of occupation is, and has been for a length of time. Let me behold what I may be in days to come. The spirit stopped, but the hand was pointing elsewhere. The house is yonder. Why do you point away? The inexorable finger underwent no change. Scrooge hastened to his office window and looked in. It was an office still, but not his. The furniture was not the same, and the figure in the chair was not himself. The ghost pointed as before, and Scrooge accompanied it until they reached an iron gate. He paused to look about him. A churchyard. Here then the wretched man whose name he was to learn lay underneath the ground. It was a worthy place, walled in by houses, overrun by grass and weeds, choked up with too much burying, fat with repleted appetite. A worthy place. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one with his hand. Before I draw near to that stone to which you point, said Scrooge, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or are they the shadows of the things that may be only? Still the ghost pointed down to the grave by which he stood. Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends to which if persevered in they must lead. But if those courses be departed from, the ends must change. Say it is thus with what you show me. The ghost
was immovable as ever. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. Am I that man who lay upon the bed? He cried upon his knees. The spirit pointed to the grave, to him, and back again. Spirit, hear me! I'm not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been. Why show me this if I am past all hope, good spirit? He pursued us down upon the ground. He fell before him. Assure me I may yet change the shadows you show me by an altered life. I will honour Christmas in my heart and try and keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone. In his agony, he caught the spectral hand. The spirit sought to free himself, but he was strong in his endeavour and detained it. The spirit strong and yet repulsed him, holding up his hands in one last prayer to have his fate reversed. He saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress, which shrank, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. Yes, the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. And the room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in. I will live in the past, the present, and the future, Scrooge repeated as he scrambled out of bed. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this. I say it on my knees, oh Jacob, on my knees. He was so fluttered and so glowing with his good intentions that his broken voice would scarcely answer to his call. He had been sobbing violently in his conflict with the spirit, and his face was wet with tears. They're not torn down, cried Scrooge, folding one of the bed curtains in his arms. They're not torn down, rings and all. They are here. I am here. The shadows of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be. I know they will. His hands were busy with his garments all this time, putting them on upside down, tearing them inside out, tearing them, mislaying them, making the parties to every type of extravagance. I don't know what to do, he said, laughing and crying in the same breath and making a perfect fool of himself with his stockings. I'm as light as a feather. I'm as merry as a schoolboy. I am as happy as an angel. I'm as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everyone, and a Happy New Year to all the world. Whee! Ha ha! Whee! He frisked himself into the sitting room where he was now standing, perfectly winded, like me. There's the corner where the ghost of Christmas present sat. There's the door where the ghost of Jacob Marley entered. There's the window where I saw the wandering spirits. It's all right. It's all true. It all happened. Really, for a man out of practice for so many years, it was a splendid laugh, a most illustrious laugh. The father in a long, long line of brilliant laughs. I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know how long I've been in the spirit world. I'm really quite a baby. Never mind. I'd rather be a baby. He was checked in his transports by the steeple ringing out the lustiest peal of bells he'd ever heard. Clash, clang, hammer, ding, dong, bell, bell, dong, ding, hammer, clang, clash. Oh, glorious, glorious. Running to the window, he opened it, put out his head. No fog, no mist, cold, bright, clear, stirring, jovial cold piping to the blood to dance to, golden sunlight, sweet fresh air, merry bells. Oh, glorious, glorious. Ah, what's today? He cried. calling downwards to a boy in Sunday clothes, who perhaps loitered to look about him. "Eh?" returned the boy with all his might of wonder. What's today, my fine fellow?" "Today?" replied the boy. "Why, it's Christmas Day." "It's Christmas Day," Scrooge said to himself. "I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. Oh, they can do anything they like. Of course they can. Of course they can. Hello, my fine fellow." "Hello," said the boy. Do you know the poulterers on the next street but one on the corner?" "I should hope I did," said the boy. "Ah, a remarkable boy, an intelligent boy. Do you know whether they have sold the prize turkey that was hanging there? No, not the little prize turkey, the big one." "What, the one as big as me?" "What a delightful boy. It's a pleasure to talk to him." "Yes, my buck, but it's hanging there now." "Is it? Well, go and buy it." "Oh, yes," said the boy doubtfully. No, said Scrooge, "I'm in earnest. Go and buy it and tell them to bring it here that I may give the man direction where to take it. Come back with the man, I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes, I'll give you half a crown." And the boy was off like a shot. He must have had a steady hand with the trigger that could have got a shot off half so fast. "I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's," said Scrooge, rubbing his hands together and spitting with a laugh. "He shan't know who sends it. There'll never have been such a joke as sending it to Bob's will be." The hand with which he wrote the address was not a steady one, but write it he did, somehow, before going downstairs to open the door, ready for the coming of the poulterer's man. And as he stood there awaiting his arrival, the knocker on the door caught his eye. "I shall love it as long as I live," said Scrooge, patting it with his hand. "What an honest expression it has in its face. It's a wonderful knocker. There's a turkey. Hello! Merry Christmas, hello!" It was a turkey. Why, it could never have stood its own 2 legs, that bird. It would have snapped them off short in minutes like sticks of sealing wax. "Why, it's impossible to carry that to Camden Town," said Scrooge with a laugh. "You must have a cab." And the chuckle with which he said this, and the chuckle with which he paid for the cab, and the chuckle with which he paid for the turkey, and the chuckle with which he recompensed the boy was only to be exceeded by the chuckle with which he sat down, breathless in his chair again, and chuckled till he cried. Shaving was not an easy task, for shaving requires attention, even if you don't dance whilst you're about it. But if he had cut off the end of his nose, he would have put a piece of sticking plaster over it and been quite satisfied. He dressed himself all in his best, and at last got out into the streets, where the people were by now pouring forth, as he had seen them, with the ghost of Christmas present. And, walking with his hands behind his back, Scrooge regarded everyone with such a delightful smile, and was so irresistibly pleasant, in a word, that 3 or 4 good-humoured fellows said, "Oh, morning, sir. Merry Christmas to you." And Scrooge said often afterwards that of all the blithe sounds ever in his ears, these were the blithest. He hadn't gone far when, coming on towards him, he beheld the portly gentleman who walked into his counting house the night before and said, "Scrooge Marley's, I believe." It sent a pang across his heart to think how this old gentleman might look upon him when they met, but he knew which path lay straight ahead, and he took it. "My dear sir," said Scrooge, quickening his pace and taking the old gentleman by both his hands, "how do you do? I trust you succeeded last night. It was very kind of you. A Merry Christmas to you. Did you? Mr. Scrooge?" "Yes, that is my name, and I fear it may not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon, and will you do me the favour?" Here Scrooge leant forward and whispered in his ear. "Well, bless my soul," said the old man, as if his breath were gone. "Mr. Scrooge, are you serious?" "If you please," said Scrooge, "and not a penny less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me that favour?" I don't know what to say," said the old man. "Don't say anything," said Scrooge. "Come and see me. Will you? Come and see me." "I will," said the man, and it was clear he meant to do so. Thank ye, said Scrooge. I am much obliged to you. I thank ye 50 times. Bless you. He went to church and walked the streets and watched the people hurrying to and fro. He patted children on the head and questioned beggars. He looked down into the kitchens of houses and up to the windows and found everything could yield him pleasure. He never dreamed that any walk or anything could bring him so much happiness. In the afternoon, he turned his steps towards his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock. Is your master at home? He said to the girl. Nice girl, very. Yes, sir, he's upstairs with mistress. I'll show you upstairs, if you please. Thank ye, he knows me, said Scrooge, already with his hand on the dining room lock. He turned it softly and sidled his face in round the door. They were looking at the table, which was spread out in great array, for these young couples are always nervous on such points and like to see that all is right. Fred! Good heart alive! How his niece by marriage started. Scrooge had forgotten for the moment about her sitting in the corner with the footstool, otherwise he'd never have done it on any account. Why, bless my soul, said Fredda. Who's that? It is I, your Uncle Scrooge. Will you let me in? Let him in? It's a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. Everything was just as it had been with the Ghost of Christmas Present. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful unanimity, wonderful happiness. But he was early to work the next morning. Oh, he was early there. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late, that was what he had set his heart upon. And he did it. Yes, he did. Clock struck 9, no Bob. 15:15, still no Bob. He was a full 18 minutes and a half behind his time. His hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter too. He was up on the stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he was trying to overtake 9 o'clock. Hello, growled Scrooge in his accustomed voice, or as near as he could feign it. What do you mean by coming here at this hour of the day? I'm very sorry, sir, said Bob. I am behind my time. You are, said Scrooge. Yes, I think you are. Walk this way, if you please. It is only once a year, sir, pleaded Bob. It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry last night, sir. Well, my friend, I shall tell you what, said Scrooge. I am not going to stand for this kind of thing any longer. And therefore, he continued, leaping down from his stool and giving Bob Cratchit such a dig in the waistcoat, and therefore, I am about to raise your salary. Bob trembled and moved a little nearer the ruler. He had a momentary idea of knocking Scrooge down with it, holding him and calling to the people in the court outside for help and a straitjacket. A Merry Christmas, Bob, said Scrooge with an earnestness that was not to be mistaken as he clapped him on the back. A Merry Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, that I've given you for many a long year. I'll raise your salary and endeavour to assist your struggling family, and we shall discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop, Bob. Make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit. Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he became a second father. He became as good a master and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, and little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happens for good on this globe at which some people do not have their fill of laughter at the outset, knowing such of these to be blind anyway, thought it as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes in grins as have the malady in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. And may that truly be said of us, and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone. Whoa! God bless us, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. There's Reggie. Abby and her songs. Ladies and gentlemen, Jamie Cunliffe. Jamie Cunliffe, thank you.
And Santony.
Tony, Dr. Tony.
Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
Have a wonderful Christmas, everyone. What a funny, strange, crazy old year. If you still haven't donated yet, put some money in the hat to the people, the homeless people, the night shelter. Thank you, the night shelter, for everything you do for our homeless people. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for supporting the Art Centre. Thank you for supporting the night shelter. Have a fabulous day tomorrow.
Yay!
Happy Christmas.
Have a lovely time, and we are going to go. Right, hit the button, Reg. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well done.
Well done.